There's one question I have. Mana and I were talking. Unfortunately, she can't join us. She has a voice today. Michael, in practicing Atma-vichara, it's always been, I think I brought this up to you before, it's always a little bit of a mystery to me. This notion of asking, who am I? I can certainly have a feeling of a self very strongly, and that can become more and more pronounced if I sort of go in that direction. But there's always an alternate path for me, is to just let go of that sense of a self, of an I. And so I am not 100% sure in doing the self-inquiry which path to go down. I actually do both, to tell you the truth.
It is necessary to let go of other things, but merely letting go of other things is not sufficient, because every night when we fall asleep, we let go of everything, and we subside in a state of what we call sleep, which is what is technically described as Monolayer. That's dissolution of mind. But Monolayer means temporary dissolution of mind. Our aim is permanent dissolution of mind, which is called manonasa. In order to achieve permanent dissolution of mind, we as the mind, or as ego, we need to experience ourselves as we actually are. What we actually are is pure awareness. When we attend to ourselves so keenly that our attention is thereby withdrawn from everything else, we are aware of ourself alone. When we are aware of ourself alone, that is a state of pure awareness, which is what we actually are. So when we experience ourselves as pure awareness, ego is then destroyed by knowledge, by the clear awareness of what we actually are, which is pure awareness. When ego is destroyed, annihilated, eradicated in this way, it will never rise again. But from Monolayer, it will always rise. The most common form of Monolayer is sleep. We all experience that every day. We can also, Monolayer can be achieved in other ways also. If you have to undergo major surgery, you'll be given anesthetics. By those drugs, it brings about a state of Monolayer. If you're in a car accident and you have head injuries, you may be in a coma. That's another state of Monolayer. If you practice yoga, pranayama, and other yogic techniques, which are specifically designed to bring about what they call nirvikalpa samadhi, it requires many years of practice to achieve that, but they can bring about this state of nirvikalpa samadhi, which Bhagavan said is just another state of Monolayer, which is of no spiritual benefit. To illustrate that, Bhagavan used to tell the story of a yogi who lived on the banks of the Ganga and was practicing pranayama and other yogic techniques, and he had become very adept at this. So he was frequently going into nirvikalpa samadhi, and he would spend long periods in nirvikalpa samadhi, sometimes days on end. So a few local people had come to revere him as a great sage, and so one person came and started serving him as a disciple, hoping that from this great sage he would be able to learn how to achieve this nirvikalpa samadhi, this very what is considered to be a very high state by the yogis. One day, when the yogi woke up from his nirvikalpa samadhi, he was feeling thirsty. So he asked his disciple to go and get water, fetch water. The Ganga was very nearby. So his disciple went to the Ganga, collected some water and brought it back to his guru. By that time, his guru had again gone back into nirvikalpa samadhi. And that time he went into nirvikalpa samadhi he went so deep into nirvikalpa samadhi, he remained in that state for 300 years. You may say, oh, that's not possible, but actually yogis can. When they when their mind is so deeply absorbed within, their breathing and their heart rate and everything slows down. So theoretically, it is possible for the body to last for. So after 300 years, he woke up, and the first thing he did was he angrily asked, "Where's my water?" So he had spent 300 years in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. In the meanwhile, the Ganga had changed its course. So whereas 300 years earlier it was nearby, then it was several miles away. The nearby village was no longer there. A jungle had grown up, and nobody was aware of his presence there. But the first thing he asked was, "Where's my water?" What Bhagavan said, the inference Bhagavan drew from this is the last thought that was in his mind before he went into Nirvikalpa Samadhi was the first thought that popped out. That means even the most superficial thought is not destroyed by Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So what to say of all the vasanas? Bhagavan used to tell this story to illustrate Monolayer is useless for weakening the vasanas, which is what we need to do. Because in a state of Monolayer, ego is subsided, emerged back in its source, so all its vasanas are subsided with it. So they will just remain as they are. When ego pops up, it pops up with all its vasanas. Vasanas cannot exist without ego. So as soon as ego rises, the vasanas are the ego's inclinations to attend to things other than itself. So as soon as we rise as ego, we rise along with these vasanas. So in order to achieve manonasa, we need to be willing to surrender ourselves. In other words, we need to be willing to dissolve back into our source permanently. In order to dissolve back into our source permanently, we need to turn our attention 180 degrees, so to speak, back towards ourselves, away from everything else, back towards ourselves. That requires intense vairagya, that is freedom from desire for other things. In other words, the Vishaya vasanas need to be weakened to a considerable extent before we will be willing to surrender ourselves, before we will have sufficient love to surrender ourselves. That is the love to turn within and surrender ourselves. And the freedom from desire for other things are just two sides of the same coin. To the extent that we have love to turn within, we'll be free of desires for other things. To the extent that we still have desires for other things, our love to turn within will be weak. So the whole process of sadhana, that is the best sadhana for weakening the Vishaya vasanas, is Atma-vichara. Other ways, other paths can weaken them to a certain extent, but are much less effective ways to weaken the Vishaya vasanas. Why is Atma-vichara the most effective way? Because Vishaya vasanas are in inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves. So holding on to self-attentiveness is directly going against the Vishaya vasana. In other words, when we hold on to self-attentiveness, we are not allowing ourselves to be swayed at all by our Vishaya vasanas. The Vishaya vasanas will continue rising. That inclination to attend to other things will still be there, but because we hold on to self-attentiveness, we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by that inclination. That is how the Vishaya vasanas are weakened. So that is what is required. So Bhagavan always used to say, Monolayer is of no use. Even if it's dressed up with a fancy name, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, it is still only Monolayer. The yogis will say, but Monolayer is different to sleep, because they'll say, whereas sleep is a state of darkness, Monolayer is a state of light. In other words, they claim there's full awareness in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, but no awareness in sleep. Bhagavan said that shows their lack of clarity, because the same light that they experience in Nirvikalpa Samadhi is there in sleep also. Sleep is a state of pure awareness, like Nirvikalpa Samadhi. They notice the difference, because whereas we go into sleep because of tiredness, they go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi deliberately. So to them, it seems to be different. But Bhagavan said, actually, there's no difference, because differences exist only in the view of the mind. In the absence of the mind, how can there be any differences? So Monolayer, whether it's Nirvikalpa Samadhi or sleep or coma or whatever it is a state of pure awareness, because we're aware of nothing other than ourselves. But ego is not thereby destroyed. Why? Because ego is absent. You cannot kill an absent ego. Ego has to be present in order to kill it. So it is as ego, but we need to experience ourselves as pure awareness. Ego is an impure awareness. That the ego is that mixed awareness. I am this body. I am this person. So long as we experience ourselves as ego, we are not experiencing ourselves as pure awareness. But when we turn our attention back within, if we turn our attention within, that if we turn the full 180 degrees, we are thereby withdrawing our attention from all other things and attending only to ourselves. Then we as ego experience pure awareness. But as soon as we experience ourselves as pure awareness, ego is thereby destroyed. Because ego is just a false awareness, I am this body. When ego experiences itself as that pure awareness, I am, it is thereby ceases to be ego and remains as it always is, which is just that pure awareness. So okay. Why this is relevant to your question, merely withdrawing our attention from other things is not self-investigation. And it is possible by meditation and various techniques to, without, that is the ultimate is to achieve Nirvikalpa Samadhi if you're withdrawing your attention from other things. But between our present state and Nirvikalpa Samadhi, there are varying degrees of quiescence of mind. They can be very pleasant states. You can enjoy a very quiet and peaceful state of mind. But because you're not attending to yourself, it's again another. What does Vishaya Vasana mean? Vasana means an inclination. Vishaya means an object or phenomenon. Anything other than ourselves is anything that comes and goes, appears and disappears, is a Vishaya. So even that peaceful state of mind, not the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, but the state of partial quiescence of mind, that is a subtle Vishaya. So we are again allowing our attention to go away from ourselves. The whole point of self-investigation is to focus our attention on ourselves, because only by focusing our attention on ourselves can we experience ourselves as we actually are. So many people wrongly think that if you achieve, they say, oh, when I meditate, I try to put away all thoughts and just to experience that quietness. They think that quietness is their real nature. It is not. Because it's something that comes and goes. It's a state of mind. It's a subtle and peaceful state of mind, but it's not our real nature. In order to experience our real nature, Bhagavan often used to say, it's all a matter of attention. This whole world exists, all these Vishayas exist because we attend to them. Now, okay. When we withdraw our attention from them, we subside into Monolayer. But that doesn't, the Monolayer doesn't destroy. We need to the attention that is now turned towards Vishayas, we need to turn that away from the Vishayas back towards I am, towards our own existence, our own awareness.
Okay, I think this is a very important point. I think so in so many of at least the Vedantic traditions, samadhi of any kind is considered a high spiritual state or progress for sure. Yeah. And but from what I'm understanding from you, that is just another Monolayer that does not do anything to destroy the ego. Yeah. I think that's basically what you're saying.
Yes.
And but I think some would claim that to get into samadhi, one has to surrender their identity as ego. But what I'm hearing from you that surrender is really not efficacious at all. It doesn't do anything really to destroy the ego, and in fact, once you avoid samadhic states and continue to, just from a layman's terminology, hold on to the sense of self, or deepen that, and concentrate and focus on that more and more.
Yeah, that's it. That's absolutely right. Even to fall asleep, we need to surrender ourselves. But that's not where we need to let go of it. So long as we're holding on to other things, we're still awake. We fall asleep because we're too tired to continue holding on to other things. So we let go. So it is a type of surrender, but it's not a surrender born of bhakti and vairagya. It's a surrender born of tiredness.
Okay, so one more, but wasn't it claimed that, or didn't Ramana claim that he himself was in sahaja samadhi?
This is what I was just going to say. That is,
okay.
The term samadhi is there. Some texts classify different types of samadhi, but generally we can say the term samadhi can refer to many different states. Some states of samadhi are what are called savikalpa samadhi. So people who experience visions of God and are completely absorbed in that vision of God, that is a savikalpa samadhi. It's not a state of Monolayer, because savikalpa means with the kalpa, with differences, with the subject-object distinction. So long as the subject-object distinction is there, it is savikalpa. So there are states of absorption in which which are not Monolayer, that is the savikalpa samadhi. Those types of samadhi, such states can be achieved in various ways through bhakti. I mean, for example, people who have ecstatic visions of God, or ecstatic feelings of the presence of God, or whatever. They're taking God to be something other than themselves. So there's still the subject-object distinction. So that's one type of samadhi. They classify many different types. They classify that one division is between savikalpa and nirvikalpa. Another one is they talk about bahir savikalpa samadhi and antara savikalpa samadhi, that is outward or inward. And they also make that distinction with nirvikalpa samadhi, which I don't understand, because if it's nirvikalpa, if there are no differences, how can you have different states of no difference? So I mean, in yoga and tantra and all these things, there are so many. That is, Hinduism is not one set of beliefs. There are so many different philosophies, strongly competing philosophies that disagree with each other. And based on these philosophies, there are different practices and so on. So the term samadhi is a term that is native to the yoga philosophy. It's very big it's a big term. I mean, it's a very important term in yoga philosophy. So it's not a term that really belongs to Advaita, but Advaitins have used the term samadhi in an attempt to show that what the yogis achieve by their yogic practices can also be achieved by this. But as I say, there's no one state that it can be referred to as samadhi. Samadhi refers to a range of states. What Bhagavan talked about sahaja samadhi, sahaja means natural. So what he meant by sahaja samadhi, our natural state, is a state of samadhi. That is, what is our natural state? Just pure being, pure awareness, pure happiness. In other words, Satchidananda. That is our real nature. Experiencing only Satchidananda and nothing else, that is sahaja samadhi. That is the state of a jnani. So when ego dissolves back into its source, what remains is only Satchidananda. It's not that we are experiencing Satchidananda, we are Satchidananda. And That is, just by being Satchidananda, we're experiencing Satchidananda. That is what Bhagavan means by the state of Sahaja Samadhi. Okay. Some people take Sahaja Samadhi to mean a state in Samadhi. You can be in Samadhi, but still walking around and talking and everything.
Yes.
The reason for that is because in our view, the jnani who is in Sahaja Samadhi seems to, because we take the jnani to be a person, a body and mind, we see Bhagavan, and we see Bhagavan, he's answering questions, he's writing poems, and he's doing all sorts of things. So he seems to us to be aware of the world and aware of all these things. But Bhagavan said, all these are only in your view. So in the view of others, the jnani who is in Sahaja Samadhi may seem to be doing so many things, may seem to be aware of the world. But in the jnani's view, there is only Satchidananda, nothing but Satchidananda.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Bhagavan also sometimes used to talk about the practice of Sahaja Samadhi. What he meant by the practice of Sahaja Samadhi is self-investigation, holding on to that. And he, in his introduction to his Tamil translation of Drig-Drisya-Viveka, he uses this term. He refers to Sahaja Samadhi Paraktal, by the practice of Sahaja Samadhi, and he describes it. Tanaye Bahyanta Tara Drishti Bedamindri Epodum Nadam Sahaja Samadhi Paraktal. What that means is, by the practice of Sahaja Samadhi, which is investigating only oneself without the distinction of always investigating only oneself without the distinction of inside and outside. That he describes it. So, but that's just another description of the practice of self-attentiveness. So if you're practicing self-attentiveness, in other words, if you're holding on to I am, you are practicing Sahaja Samadhi.
Okay.
So, but coming back to your original question, the main point to understand is the absolute key, what Bhagavan is emphasizing is turning our attention back to ourselves and holding on to that self-attentiveness. That's why he said, what does it matter however many thoughts appear? What Bhagavan means when he's talking about thoughts, people take thoughts to mean just some mental chatter or verbal thoughts. What Bhagavan means by thoughts, according to Bhagavan, the whole world is nothing but thoughts. In Nāṉ Ār, he says in the 4th paragraph, if you remove all thoughts, there's no such thing as world separately. So the world is nothing but thoughts. All phenomena are only thoughts because they're all mental phenomena. So what Bhagavan means by thought is anything other than ourselves. All objects, all phenomena are thoughts, even the subject. Ego is itself a thought. Why? Yes. Because unlike all other thoughts are jada, that is, they have no awareness. But though ego is aware, it's aware of itself as an object. It takes this bundle of 5 sheaths called body to be itself. So it's though it's awareness, it has entangled itself with this body, which is non-aware, which is an object. That's why it's called Chit Jada Granti. But so even because it's a mixture of what is real and what is unreal, it is unreal. In other words, it's just a thought. That's why Bhagavan often described ego as the thought called I.
Yes, for sure, the more and more Atma-vichara is practiced, you come to see that any perception is equivalent as just a thought. It becomes very, very clear. Even the sense
absolutely,
of even a thought is no more mental than viewing something or hearing something. They're all seem to be exactly the same.
Exactly. All what is the world? Bhagavan says in the 6th verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, the world is nothing but the 5 kinds of sense impression.
Right.
There untrue. He said nothing else. Because what is the world? Sight, sounds, touch,
Perception.
tactile sensation, taste, and smell. Remove all these five. Where is any world? So it's just these are just perceptual impressions, sensory impressions, and they're impressions in the mind. So they're all mental impressions. So they're nothing but thoughts.
Yeah,
but
and for sure, when that is seen very clearly, and you ask to whom are these perceptions occurring, it's a very focusing.
That is this pointer that Bhagavan gave in the form of a question to whom. What does that mean? It means whatever appears, don't attend to what appears. Turn your attention back towards that to which it appears.
Right.
In other words, turn your attention back to that is another place in the 16th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. Bhagavan defines what is vichara. He says, Sada kalamam, always, manate atma-vilve tirupatikutan, only to keeping the mind fixed always in oneself, does the name Atma-vichara refer. In other words, Atma-vichara is nothing but keeping our mind fixed in ourselves. In other words, keeping our mind fixed in ourselves means keeping our attention fixed on ourselves.
Yeah, I think the confusion for me is the sense of self is just another thought, another perception, and by asking to whom does that?
No. Well, first, it's not a matter of asking. That is, Bhagavan gave pointers in the form of questions, but he didn't expect us to be asking those questions.
Right. It's not a verbal question for sure. Yeah.
The sense of self, is it a thought? It is a thought to the extent that it's mixed and conflated with adjuncts, with objects. Because that is ego, is that mixed awareness, I am this body, I am this person. When we're investigating ourselves, it's not the body that we're investigating. It's not any of these five sheaths we're investigating. It is the I am portion of ego. So the essential self-awareness is not a thought. It only seems to be a thought when it's mixed, when it's conflated with these adjuncts. So we are trying to hold on to the fundamental awareness of our own existence. That fundamental awareness of our own existence is not a thought because it exists throughout all the three states. We are as clearly aware of our own existence in sleep as we are in waking and dream. The difference is, in waking and dream, we mixed up this fundamental awareness of our existence with adjuncts, and we take ourselves in other words, we're not aware of ourselves as just I am. We're aware of ourselves as I am Dan, or I am Michael, I am this body, I'm this person. What we actually are is just that fundamental awareness I am. That is what we are trying to hold on to. That is not a thought. So can I just say one more thing? So what we are trying to hold on to, all thoughts appear and disappear. Even this first thought, the thought called I, with ego, appears and disappears because it appears in waking and dream, it disappears in sleep. But what is it that remains without ever appearing and disappearing, which is the ground from which everything appears and into which everything disappears? That is that fundamental awareness I am. That is what we are trying to hold on to.
I appreciate that explanation. It's a little contrary to the way I've understood self-investigation to be.
Okay.
It might profit a couple of us, I know it would me, to have a primer, a further, deeper explanation of what exactly self-inquiry is. You just touched on it, of course.
Yes.
And that was a flip-flop for me because I actually did think it was trying to understand who I'm not. Neti, all these things.
Yes.
And if I could investigate self to the extent of convincing myself that none of these earth, mind, body functions, thoughts are who I am, it would bring me closer to the I am, which is, as I understand now,
Yes.
the object of self-investigation.
Right.
So if I start looking at it from the point of view, self-investigation is to see more deeply who I am, how do I go about exploring the unknown? In other words, I've never really been there before. I suffer. I'm a very literal person, even when it comes to my spiritual world,
Okay.
spiritual life. And I would profit from a little more explanation of that.
Okay. No, that's very good. Firstly, we are not exploring the unknown. We are exploring that which is ever known.
But not consciously.
Yes, consciously.
In the mind-body consciousness?
Not in the mind-body consciousness. It is the ground from which the mind-body consciousness arises. Are you not aware I am?
Yes, but I take that on faith when it comes to the higher I am. I'm aware of the body I am.
There is no higher I am. You don't have to believe anything. There is only one I am. You are that.
Yes, then I'm aware of it.
The difference between ego and our real nature, it's only one I, but when that one I remains in its pure condition, as just I am, that is our real nature. When it's mixed with adjuncts, as I am Ted, then it becomes ego. So now you're aware of yourself as I am Ted.
Yes.
Ted is unreal. Ted is the name of a person, of a body. What is real in that mixed awareness, I am Ted, is only I am. That is what you call the higher I am. It is never unknown. It is always known.
Well,
so that is why Bhagavan often used to say, there is nothing new to be known. If jnana was a new knowledge to be attained, whatever is gained will be lost. But it will never be lost, because even now it's not lost. It is what is ever existent. So what we need to be free of is what is unreal. If we hold on to what is real, what is unreal will slip off. What is real is only I am.
So I practice going into a deeper understanding of I am, the way you describe it, as the one and only true, pure consciousness I am. Yeah. But it reminds me of being in the 4th grade play acting a role. I'm intellectually putting myself there, but I can't prove beyond an intellectual awareness that I'm actually there, although I mouth the words, speak the lines. I still feel grounded more than I want to in the mind-body illusory I am.
Right. You mentioned earlier about neti-neti. Neti-neti is a description of the analysis of ourself that is necessary. That is, we need to understand what we are not in order to investigate what we are. If we don't understand that we are not this body or this mind or this will, or we're not anything that appears and disappears, we will be attending. If I take myself to be this person, Michael, and I'm asked to investigate myself, I'll be investigating Michael. I may be investigating where this body was born, what is its lineage or something, who will be ancestors. Or if I take myself to be the mind, what is the nature of this mind? Why these? You can go into a sort of Jungian psychoanalysis or something. All this is investigating what I am not. So we first need to understand what we are not in order to know what it is we are to investigate. We are not to investigate what we are not, we are to investigate what we are. So if we analyze ourselves, the only thing that is constant is the fundamental awareness I am. The body and mind appear in waking and dream, they disappear in sleep. But even ego appears and disappears. Ego is a mixed awareness, I am this body and mind. What remains constant through all the 3 states is just this fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. That is Satchit. That alone is real. That is what we need to hold on to. And that is the one thing, it's not unknown. It's the one thing we know always. Why we think of it as unknown? Because our attention is so much on other things, we are overlooking what is ever present. What is the divinity within us? It is I am. So hold on to the divinity within you. Hold on to what is real. That is I am. Then the unreal will drop off. So long as you're thinking, neti, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, you're holding on to the unreal. Because in order to think, I'm not this body, you have to think about the body. Bhagavan sometimes used to give an analogy. If you I don't know if Bhagavan, certainly Sadhguru gave this analogy, I think it came from Bhagavan. If you go to a doctor and the doctor gives you a medicine and tells you, take this medicine, but when you take it, don't think of a monkey. You will never be able to take the medicine because every time you want to take the medicine, you'll remember the doctor's instruction, but you're not to think of a monkey. You've already thought of a monkey. So what will a wise doctor tell you? He will say, whenever you take this medicine, think of an elephant. When you're thinking of an elephant, you're not thinking of a monkey, then you can safely take the medicine. So thinking of what we are not is attaching ourselves to those things. That is, thinking about anything is grasping it in our awareness. We want to let go of everything. So what should we grasp? Only I am, because I am alone is what is real. So well, the elephant you should think of while taking this medicine of Atma-vichara is only I am. The monkey you shouldn't think of is anything other than I am. And if thought of anything other than I am comes, what do? To whom did this thought appear? And we turn our attention back to the elephant. I am.
I'll start doing that from now on.
Yes.
Part of the problem is, and there's a term for it, and it escapes my mind right now. A piece of paper has 1,000 dots on it, and if you turn that piece of paper this way, you'll see just 1,000 dots. If you turn it just like that, you'll see embedded within the 1,000 dots the form of a lion or the form of a bicycle. And it's a subtle, very minute shift in identity as you just turn it a little bit. And you get to the point where you don't even have to turn it. I'm not there yet with seeing the pure consciousness of I am. I tell myself it's there. I practice it with self-inquiry. I put my attention on it all the time. And I hear you say, you already know that. Well, the side of me that's conscious in the I am knows that.
Yes.
But unfortunately, the gravitational pull of the consciousness of the I am in the mind-body state that's been there for 7 decades seems to win out mostly. So that's where...
It hasn't been there just for 7 decades.
Right.
Bhagavan begins with that gravity you're talking about is what is called Vishaya Vasanas, our inclination to attend to things other than ourselves. And Bhagavan begins the 10th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār saying, Tondru Totu Varakindra, the Vishaya Vasana, the Vishaya Vasanas, which have been coming from Tondru Totu is an idiom in Tamil. It means from the beginning of time, from time immemorial. So that is, as soon as we rise as ego, we cannot rise or stand as ego without grasping form, without grasping things other than ourselves. As Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes. So the very nature of ego is to grasp forms. So the Vishaya Vasanas are the ego's inclination to grasp form. It's the very nature of ego to have Vishaya Vasanas. So we are now trying, our nature as ego is to always be grasping things other than ourselves. But that is not our real nature. Our real nature is just to be as we are, to grasp nothing other than ourselves. So when we are trying to practice self-investigation, we are trying to leave behind our ego nature and restore our and return to our ever-present real nature, which is just pure awareness.
Yes, I appreciate that. And don't get me wrong, I feel like I've made more progress in the last, since I've known you, since this group has come into our lives on Sundays, than all the other years combined pretty much. I'm not sure if I can literally defend that, but I think it's true. And there's no day that goes by that I don't get up, and the minute my eyes open up, I'm repeating to myself before I get out of bed, I am that I am, now and forever. I am the one. And every other variation on that same theme. So I'm in the groove intellectually and with practice and with intention and with sincerity. No question about it in my mind. I lack still a little bit seeing that subtle shift that feels genuine. I imagine the subtle shift, but I can't say that I feel that it's genuine yet.
It will become absolutely clear how genuine it is only when the surrender is complete, when ego dissolves back into its source. But the one thing that we know with absolute certainty, the one thing we cannot doubt is I am. We are all clearly aware of our own existence and our own awareness. Existence and awareness actually are one and the same thing. When we say I am, we're referring both to our existence and to our awareness. So we all, that is the very nature of consciousness, of awareness, is to be aware of itself as I am. So that is there. The problem is everything that we've superimposed on that and mixed up with that. So we are now trying to separate ourselves. How do we separate ourselves? Not by thinking I'm not this, just by holding on to what is real. So we just have to persevere in this practice. The more we persevere in this practice, the clearer the way will become. So don't expect some dramatic shift. That is, it's a steady deepening. The dramatic shift is the dissolution of ourself in our source. That is final, and we'll not be there to know about that, because that's a loss of ourself. Until then, it is a matter of just steadily persevering in trying to hold on to this I am more and more and more.
Thank you.
Don't worry about other things. Other things will drop off of their own accord. When you hold what is real, what is unreal will drop off.
Great. Thank you for that.
So it's just a matter of persevering in the practice.
I think we all need a pep talk from time to time.
But
Michael, I have a question.
Can I just say one more thing? Then I'll come to your question. That is, you mentioned understanding. Understanding is necessary, but it is necessary in order to put this into practice correctly. And as we go deeper in the practice, our understanding will grow deeper and clearer. But understanding is a means, not an end. Because the one who is to understand all these things, the goal we are seeking is the dissolution of this I that rises to understand anything. So understanding is necessary as a means. That is, without proper understanding, we won't be doing this investigation properly. And the more we do this investigation, the deeper and clearer our understanding will become. But the understanding is just like the map you take on the journey. It is not the journey and it's not the destination. It is an aid it's a necessary aid on the journey. In order to reach your destination, you need your GPS. The GPS is the understanding, but the GPS isn't the journey, and it's not the goal.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Ronnie.
So, Michael, this is, you either have it or you don't have it, because you need that perfect 180 degrees, right?
Well, let's put it a bit more. We all have it. Let's not think in terms of not having it.
Yeah.
We either have adjuncts or we have no adjuncts. That's because what is ever present, it's not a matter of, there's nothing to be gained. What we are trying to do is to lose everything, to give up everything. We give up everything by holding on to what is real.
So, in the process of, Ramana says there are two different modes, modalities of, for want of a better word, self-realize. And that is one, Atma-vichara, the second is surrender. But I'm realizing that the two are actually going hand in hand. The more, it's like more layers are peeled off. There's the surrender element coming into the play. Is that just from my imagination, or is there
we cannot investigate ourselves without surrendering ourselves. To the extent that we are investigating ourselves, we are thereby surrendering ourselves. Because the more keenly we attend to ourselves, the more we're letting go of other things, and ego is thereby subsiding. Surrender can begin before we take to self-investigation. That is, surrender generally begins on the path of bhakti. We want to give ourselves to God. And we think God is someone other than ourselves, and we want to surrender ourselves to him, but then we find our will is coming between us and him. Because in order to surrender ourselves to God, we need to accept everything is his will. Whatever happens is his will, and we should be happily accepting that. But we find we still have likes, dislikes, and so on. So we understand at the early stages of surrender that our will is what stands between us and God. So we try to surrender our will. Not my will, but your will. Thy will be done. So that's the beginning stages of surrender. But as we go deeper in the surrender, we come to understand we cannot give up our will without giving up ego, the one who has the will, because the will is all the vasanas. Whose vasanas are they? They are ego's vasanas. It's the very nature of ego to have vasanas. So we can weaken our vasanas, we can weaken our desires and attachments and so on. We cannot give them up entirely without giving up ego. So we, from the preliminary stage of surrender, where we're just trying to surrender our will, we come to understand we have to surrender this ego. But in order to surrender this ego, how can we ego is what we now seem to be. How can we surrender ourselves? Only by knowing what we actually are. So this is where the surrender merges and becomes one with the path of vichara. So vichara, from the very beginning, involves surrender, because to the extent you attend to yourself, you're thereby surrendering yourself. But surrender can begin before vichara. It's like the from Prayag, from Allahabad onwards, it's one river. The tributaries join together and they become one river. That one river is Atma-vichara. So the surrender that begins with dualistic devotion, taking God to be other than ourselves, trying to surrender ourselves to God, merges into this path of vichara. Only by vichara can the surrender become complete. That is why in the 13th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, that's the paragraph in which Bhagavan talks about surrender, he begins that paragraph by saying, he defines what it is to give ourselves to God. He says, the main clause is, Atmanishta paranai iripade tanne isanuku alepadam. That means being one who is firmly established as oneself is giving oneself to God. So how can we be one who is firmly established as oneself? He explains that in an adverbial clause, which is the beginning part of the sentence. Atma-chintane tavira, vera chintane kalambavatiku satam idam kadamo. That means without giving the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than Atma-chintana. Atma-chintana literally means thought of oneself. It implies self-attentiveness. So what Bhagavan implies in this sentence is clinging so firmly to self-attentiveness that we thereby give no room to the rising of other thoughts. Why is that? if we're attending to us, no thought can rise unless we attend to it. If we're attending only to ourselves, we are thereby giving no room to the arising of other thoughts. Being so keenly self-attentive that we give no room to rising of other thought is how to be as we actually are. And being as we actually are is giving ourselves to God. So by self-attentiveness, we bring about the subsidence of the ego. The subsidence and ultimate dissolution of ego, that is surrender. So though Bhagavan presented it as two paths, for people who of different mental makeup, some people are more attracted to the jnana aspect of the teaching, some people are more attracted to the bhakti aspect of the teaching. But if we begin to apply either in practice, we will find they are one and the same. And when we go deeply into this practice, we really cannot, that is, as Bhagavan said, bhakti is the mother of jnana. Love is the mother of true knowledge. So why? Because in order to know what we actually are, we need to surrender this ego. And we will not surrender to this ego until we have all-consuming love just to be as we actually are. So bhakti and jnana are preliminary stages of bhakti. It may be separate from jnana, but jnana, the path of jnana from the beginning requires bhakti. So we can say the culmination of all spiritual paths is bhakti. Bhakti is the highest of all spiritual paths. The culmination or pinnacle of the path of bhakti is surrender. And the pinnacle of the path of surrender is Atma-vichara, because the surrender can become complete only by Atma-vichara. That is why Bhagavan said, this path of Atma-vichara, this is para-bhakti. This is the supreme devotion. Because without great love, because in order to practice self-investigation, we need to be willing to give up everything. Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what this is giving up everything. Because to the extent we investigate ourselves, we are thereby giving up ego, and by giving up ego, we're giving up everything else. So this is surrender can reach its conclusion. Surrender can become complete. Surrender can be fulfilled only by means of Atma-vichara. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you so much, because I was viewing them as two sides of the same coin, but they're not. It's like one is leading to the dissolution of the other. So it's morphed into one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
The path of surrender has to lead to and merge in the path of vichara in order to be complete. Why is that? There's a very simple reason for that. Bhagavan has explained what is the nature of ego. In verse 25 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, he says, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping inferior form, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving one form, it grasps another form. So grasping form is the very nature of ego. So long as grasping form means all phenomena are forms. Anything other than ourselves, all vishayas are forms. So anything other than ourselves is a form. So attending to anything other than ourselves is a means to nourish and sustain ego. So long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves, we seem to be ego. But he says in the same verse, Tedinal otum pidicum. If sought, it takes flight. That means if ego, instead of grasping other things, tries to grasp itself, it will subside and disappear. So the surrender can be achieved, complete surrender can be achieved only by self-investigation. There is no other way. So this path of Atma-vichara is the pinnacle or the culmination of the path of surrender, which is the culmination of the path of bhakti, which is the culmination of all other spiritual paths.
Yeah, I think C.R. Rajagopalachari said that in the end, everything merges because there's only one.
Yes.
So there
yes.
is no different bhakti, karma, or
Yes.
jnana yoga. Everything is one.
Everything has emerged, so it has to merge back again. That's why Bhagavan sometimes used to say, go the way you came. Where did we come from? We came from I am. We have to go back to I am. Simple as that. How to go back to I am? Hold on to it because it's ever present. It's ever available, ever clearly shining.
Yes, and he said it's the easiest thing to do.
Yes, it is. It really is the easiest thing to do. It seems to us to be difficult because of our lack of willingness. And we are unwilling because of the strength of our Vishaya Vasanas. So how to overcome the Vishaya Vasanas? How to weaken the Vishaya Vasanas? Only by persevering in this practice. However difficult it may seem to be, even a little effort made in this path, but Bhagavan, it's often you say, even a little effort made in this path of vichara is worth 1,000 times more effort made in any other path. This is because this is the direct path. This is going directly. That is what is our aim: to know who am I. How to know who am I? Hold on to I am. Everything else will drop off. All other paths are roundabout ways, and they have to eventually come back to this path. Because we can't know ourselves without looking, we can't see what we actually are without looking at ourselves.
But it seems difficult to do because ego seems to be 100% of our existence. That's an exaggeration. I no longer think it's 100% of my existence. But Michael, wasn't it you or somebody here on a Sunday once who mentioned that even our breath is ego? It's phenomenal. It's part of the mind-body construct. And if we focus on proper breathing, we're focusing on ego there.
No,
We can't win for losing.
No. Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, as I say, ego itself is everything. What he means by that is, in a dream, when we see so many phenomena in a dream, we see a whole world and we see people and all these things. When we wake up from a dream, we recognize what were we seeing? It was only ourselves we were seeing as that dream. So ego sees itself as all these phenomena, but attending to the phenomena is not attending to ego. We need to cease attending to any phenomena and attend only to whom do all these phenomena appear. That is what we need to attend to. So attending to our breath is, again, it's attending to something other than ourselves. So that is, so long as you're attending to anything other than yourself, you are thereby nourishing and sustaining ego. In order to dissolve ego, you need to hold on only to I am and nothing other than I am.
So one quick question on this.
Yes.
I completely understand what you're saying. If Ted goes around and worries about his next meal, that's tending to ego. If Ted goes around and worries about whether or not his cold, the slight discomfort he has because of the cold he has might be COVID, that's ego. However, it's my understanding that when I am in the flow, in various groups, various people use different words. Let's say I am a piano teacher and I'm sitting down with a client and I'm really focusing on teaching the lesson of piano so this person gets it. That's not egoful because it's not mindless thought. That's a function you're performing for the well-being of another. Am I wrong there?
You're wrong there, yes.
All of
You say I am absorbed in, I'm so absorbed in the piano playing.
Yeah.
You may be overlooking the presence of ego there, but ego is the subject. Ego is that which experiences all this. That which is aware of anything other than I am is only ego.
Well, then you're making a very, very, very good case that we all need to pack our bags and move into the nearest cave and be self-sustaining with the minimum.
Yes. This is what Bhagavan recommends, that we should all move into the nearest cave. Where is the nearest cave?
Right here.
The cave of your own heart. In other words, I am is that cave. So move into I am. Leave all this world and retreat to that cave of I am.
Thank you. I get that.
Going off to the Himalayas and sitting in a cave in the Himalayas is not going to do you much good for you, because you'll be taking your mind with you. But the one cave which you can enter only by leaving your mind outside is that cave I am.
Good.
Because the problem is the mind. We need to. It's not the wife and the children and the mortgage and the pension and all these other things that we have to leave. It is that which has attached itself to all these things. That is ego or mind. That is what we need to leave. We can leave it only by holding on to what is real, which is I am.
So give me an example of doing that while you're teaching piano. How are you residing within the cave of the heart, of the I am, while you're also using your mind?
To the extent you are attending to I am, you're not doing anything. To the extent you're doing anything, to the extent you feel I am doing this, your attention has gone away from yourself towards some action.
But we all have to have a living. So how do we accomplish that?
In the early days, when Bhagavan was living on the hill, Kavya Ganta, who was he was much interested in doing tapas, because he thought that by tapas he can get power for doing. He had so many aims and ambitions, but he wanted power, and he thought he could get power by doing tapas. One of the ingredients of his tapas was trying to live a very frugal and simple lifestyle. So once he came to Bhagavan and he said, Bhagavan, it seems to me that for just we can live on just 3 rupees a month. Bhagavan said, we can live even without the body. Where then is the need for 3 rupees? We don't need anything. We need only I am, which is ever present. The problem is we are holding on to other things instead of holding on to I am. If you hold on to I am, nothing else is necessary, because everything else is unreal. I am alone is real. But regarding the life of the body, when you say we need this, we need that, we need 3 rupees a month, or we need so much food every month, we need to pay the rent, all these things are for the body. So long as we take ourselves to be this body, we seem to have so many needs. But if we're holding on to I am, we don't need anything. And as far as the needs of the body is concerned, Bhagavan has given us a very great assurance. He says it's all according to prarabdha. Whatever this body, this person you seem to be, is destined to experience in this life, it will experience. Whatever it is not destined to experience, it will not experience. So we can leave the body and mind to the care of prarabdha. That's the God's will. God will take care of it. Our only aim is to surrender ourselves to God. How do we surrender ourselves to God? By holding on to I am. Because who is God? I am.
Thank you, because I think I'm the only slowpoke here in getting this through my thick head. And I really appreciate this deeper dive.
We are all, that is, it's even I'm that though I'm able to talk about these things, still the mind is going outwards, because so long as the Vishaya vasanas are there, we are not ready to let go of everything else and to hold on to I am. So we're all dull in this respect. But how to become sharp, how to become bright? Only by clinging on to the original source of light. What is the light that illumines all this world? That is, the physical light illumines physical objects. The light of the mind illumines all phenomena. But what is the light that enables the mind to know all phenomena? That is the original light, the light of I am. So the more we cling to I am, the more this dull mind will become bright. It will be clarified, purified. And eventually it will lose itself in that light. It will dissolve back into the light from which it came.
You've always said that. Now it's simply clear for me, and I really do thank you.
Yeah. So all we have to do is to persevere in this practice. That's all that is required. And Bhagavan's teachings are all about, if we understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly, whatever he has taught us, it is only to direct us back to holding on to I am. That is the beginning and the end of his teachings. The sum and substance of his teachings. The Alpha and the Omega. In Greek, they say Alpha and Omega, the first and last letters of the alphabet. In Sanskrit, the first and last letters of the alphabet is A and Ha, Aham. So that Aham is the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end of everything. Hold on to I am.
Well, now that the introductory remarks have been made, we can get into the meat of the... Thank you, Michael. That was so clarifying. So much of this has been said, but it's always good to hear it again and again. And some, things do become clearer. So we really appreciate that.
We all need, myself as much as anyone, we all need to be dinning this into our thick heads again. That we need to be constantly reminding ourselves, this is the sole purpose of our life. This is, if we are all seeking happiness, where can we find happiness? Only in I am. So hold on to I am more and more and more. Bhagavan's teachings, all his teachings from beginning to end, they're all pointing at the same thing. So they're all dealing in the same thing. So long as we allow our mind to go outwards, we need to be reminding ourselves of this in order to turn it back within. Within means towards I am.
Yes.
Everything other than I am is outside.
Well, to that point, I'm not sure where we left off last time you were here. I don't know if there's enough time, but maybe we can just go ahead and persevere.
We can go ahead. Last time we were up to, we completed paragraph 6. So paragraph 7, the first sentence of paragraph 7 is exactly what we've been talking about. Well, it's saying it in a different way, what we've been talking about. In the first sentence of paragraph 7, Bhagavan says, Yathatamai Uḻḷadu Atma-Swarupam Andre. That means what actually exists is only Atma-Swarupa. Atma-Swarupa, Atma means oneself, Swarupa means real nature. So the real nature of ourself, what we actually are, that alone is what actually exists. So what actually are we? Bhagavan has explained very clearly in verse 28 of Upadēśa Undiyār. There he says, if one knows what the nature of oneself is, then Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda. That is, then Anadi means beginningless. Ananta means endless, limitless, infinite. Akhanda means unbroken, undivided. Satchidananda, pure being, pure awareness, and pure happiness. That is what we actually are. And if we know what we actually are, that alone is what will actually exist, because that alone is what will remain, because that is what actually exists. So that is what Bhagavan is referring to when he says here that what actually exists is only the real nature of ourselves. What we actually are alone actually exists. And what are we? We are pure being, pure awareness, and pure happiness, which is Anadi, beginningless, Ananta, endless, limitless, infinite, and Akhanda, unbroken, indivisible. So that is what we actually are. That alone is what actually exists. So, but there seem to us to be so many things here. There seems to be, there's this world, and there's me, and there's we believe there's some God who created this world or is taking care of this world. What are all these things? If what actually exists is only our real nature, Bhagavan says in the second sentence, the world, soul, and God are fabrications in it. In it means in Atma-Swarupa, like the silver in a shell. just like there's no silver actually in the shell. Some shells have a silvery lining, mother of pearl. That is just an illusion. It doesn't actually, all that's there is a shell. It just gives the appearance of being silver. Like that appearance, this world, soul, and God, they're mere appearances. They're mere fabrications. Kalpanegal is the word Bhagavan uses. That's the Sanskrit word kalpana. Kalpana means a fabrication, imagination, mental creation, or an illusion, an illusory superimposition. So Bhagavan says here, what actually exists is only what we actually are. The world, the soul, and God are all just fabrications, mental creations. The soul is ourself, is the person. Soul means ego. So this ego, the one to whom this world appears, and one who believes in the existence of a God, is itself an appearance. So the world and God are equally well appearances. Here, what he means by God is, so long as we rise as ego, we seem to be a finite creature. So the infinite whole, which is our real nature, seems to be something separate from ourselves. That seemingly separate thing is what we call God, that infinite whole, but seems to be separate. But there's a contradiction here. If God is infinite, nothing can be other than him. But so long as we separate ourselves, we can't say that we are God. So we seem to have separated ourselves from God. So we've made the infinite whole into something finite. Because if we are something other than God, then God is thereby limited. He's finite. So that is the God of our conception, the God who seems to be other than ourselves, so long as we still limit ourselves. That's what he's referring to here. Because what God actually is only our real nature. Then he says in the next sentence, these three, that the world, soul, and God, appear simultaneously and disappear simultaneously. That is, as soon as we wake up in the morning, as soon as we begin to dream, we rise as ego, and there seems to be a world and there seems to be a God. When we merge back into sleep, all three disappear. So they appear simultaneously and disappear simultaneously. Then he says, Swarupam. Here he's what he referred to in the first sentence as Atma-Swarupa, the real nature of ourself. Here he's referring to the same thing, but more briefly, it's just Swarupa. That Swarupa means our real nature. Our real nature alone is the world. Our real nature alone is I, that's ego or jiva. Our real nature is God. So Swarupa me jagam. Swarupa alone is the world. Swarupa alone is I. Swarupa alone is God. Ellam Shiva Swarupa me. Everything is Shiva Swarupa. Shiva Swarupa means it's a synonym for Atma Swarupa, because according to Shiva Prakash Pillai, who was a Shaivite, he came from a Shaivite background. So Shiva in this context means Brahman, the absolute whole. So Shiva Swarupa is Atma Swarupa, what we actually are. So everything is only that. When Bhagavan says everything is only that, that is in the same sense that we can say the snake is only a rope. That is, what is actually there is only the rope. But when we mistake it to be a snake, we have to say that we have to be told that snake is actually only a rope. So everything appears only when we rise as ego. But all this, whatever we see, we are seeing, it's only us. Since we alone actually exist, when we see other things, it's our self that we are seeing as all these other things. So what we have to, the implication of this paragraph is that what is real is only I am. Everything else is a mere appearance. It appears when we rise as ego, everything else appears. When ego subsides, everything else disappears. So all this, as Bhagavan said in verse 25 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Ahande Yavamam. Ego itself is everything. That is, it is ego that appears as all this world. And what is ego? If we investigate this ego, we will find it's nothing but pure awareness. So ultimately, everything merges back into Swarupa. Swarupa alone is what is real. There's one important point to notice here. He says here, these three, meaning this world, soul, and God, appear simultaneously and disappear simultaneously. But earlier in the fifth paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, that's 2 paragraphs earlier, what he refers to in the fifth paragraph as the thought called I, or the first person, is ego, jiva. And there he says, of all the thoughts that arise in the mind, the thought called I is the first thought. Only after this rises do other thoughts rise. So here he says, first I thought this ego rises, the thought called I rises, and then only other things rise. But in this 7th paragraph, he's saying they arise simultaneously. This may seem to be a contradiction, but it is not a contradiction. The reason being, the ego is the first rising in the sense that ego is the cause. Or everything else, the world and God, they are effects. That is only when we rise as ego are we aware of things other than ourselves. So the world and the God who seems to be other than ourselves are all in effect. The cause is ego. So though they all rise and subside simultaneously, the cause is ego. This is, Bhagavan says this in another way in the 7th verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. There he uses a word arivu, which means awareness, but the awareness he's talking about here is the awareness that knows the world. The awareness that knows the world is ego. So what he refers to here as awareness is ego. So what he says in verse 7 is, though the world and awareness arise and subside simultaneously, the world shines only by awareness. What that means is, that is the awareness, as I say, is ego. So the world, the phenomena, everything other than ourselves, rises along with ourself as ego. So when ego rises, everything else rises, as he says in verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. So though the world and awareness, namely ego, rise and subside simultaneously, the world shines by awareness. That means, what he means by shines by awareness, the world, where does the world exist? Only in the view of ego. So without ego, the world cannot either exist or shine. It's entirely dependent on our rising as ego. Only when we rise as ego does there seem to be a world, and does there seem to be a God separate from ourselves. So the world and God are effects. Ego is the cause. So when he says that only after ego rises do other things rise, what he means is ego is the cause, other things are the effect. So they all arise simultaneously in time, but in terms that is in chronological sequence, they appear simultaneously. But in causal sequence, the cause logically has to come before the effect. So it's in that sense. What Bhagavan is implying in the 5th paragraph is that ego is the cause and everything else is the effect. So as I'll just finish reading this what he says in this 5th paragraph. He says, of all the thoughts that appear in the mind, the thought called I, namely ego, is the first thought. Only after this rises do other thoughts rise. Other thoughts means all phenomena, everything other than ourselves. Then he says the same thing using different terms in the next sentence. He says, that is, only after the first person appears do second and third persons appear. Here, the first person means the subject, ego. Second and third persons means all phenomena, everything other than ego. So only after the first person appears do second and third persons appear. Without the first person, second and third persons do not exist. So Bhagavan always emphasizes this point, right? The first rising, the cause of all other rising, is our rising as ego. So if we put an end to the rising of ego, we put an end to everything. So in the 7th paragraph, when he said these three arise and appear simultaneously, we need to understand in whose view do these things appear and whose view do they disappear? It's only in the view of ego. So ego is the first rising, and as soon as we rise as ego, we bring world and God into existence. That is, God as something separate from ourselves. When we merge back into our source and remain as we actually are, that is what God actually is. That is what we actually are. That is what the world actually is. Everything is only that, because we alone are what actually exists. So whatever else seems to exist is only an appearance in that. Since there's only a rope there on the path, the snake must only be a rope. It cannot be anything other than the rope, because the rope alone is what exists there. So this is the 7th paragraph. Do you have any questions about this, or would you like me to continue with the next paragraph?
Well, we can continue. I'd just like to make a comment. I think this verse really stresses the Drig-Drisya-Viveka point of view,
yes.
Where there isn't an objective world,
No.
as certainly scientific-minded people would, or modern people really would feel like there is an objective
Not only
world.
modern people, it's
probably been going on forever. Like the objective world.
That is, so long as we are dreaming, the dream world seems to be real.
Yes, and that we're born into it and then die from it.
Yeah.
In fact, it's the subject is the cause of the objective.
Yes.
And not the other way around.
Yes,
so I think, and that's really hard for us to really accept, even though intellectually we may get that, but everything seems so real, and I guess it'll continue that way until the ego is destroyed.
It will continue. It will continue. But the reason we need to understand, why did Bhagavan stress this so much? Because if we are willing to accept this, to the extent we are willing to accept this, to that extent will we be willing to let go of other things and hold on to I am. So all these things, some people refer to these things as, oh, this is just the theory. This isn't theory. This is more, but all these, whatever Bhagavan has taught us, it all has practical implications. What is real is only ourself. What actually exists is only ourself. Ourself means that fundamental awareness I am. Since that alone is real, we should hold on to what is real. If we hold on to what is real, what is unreal will slip off. So Bhagavan is always constantly pointing us back to ourself. Why can be concerned about the world or about God or about ego? What is real is only our real nature. That is I am. Hold on to I am and let everything else take care of itself.
Right. And I think it also really underscores the importance of Atma-vichara. Without destroying the subject, the objective will always continue, right? So it really stresses that or makes it very clear why it is that we need to keep our focus on the subject in order to dispel this our ego itself. But
it's also very helpful to understand why all this seems to be real. That is, so long as we are dreaming, the dream world seems to be real. But as soon as we wake up, we're able to recognize, oh, it was just a dream. It wasn't real. It was just a creation of my own mind. How are we able to recognize that when we wake up, but they're not able to recognize that while sleeping?
Right.
There's a very simple reason for that. While we are dreaming, we experience ourselves as a person in that dream. In other words, we are aware of ourselves as a body in that dream. Because what is actually real is only ourself. When we experience a body as ourself, that body seems to us to be real. Because since I am real, if this body is I, then the body must be real. So whatever body we take to be ourself always seems to be real. And since this body is a part of this big world, the world seems to be real. So as long as we are dreaming, the dream seems perfectly real. Only when we wake up, we cease identifying with that dream body and begin to identify with this body. Because we no longer identify with that dream body, it no longer seems to be real, and the world no longer seems to be real. So why does this present world seem to be so real? Because we are so deeply rooted in this experience. I am this body. So because this body seems to be ourself, and what is actually real is only I. If the body is I, the body must also be real. And since this body is part of the world, the whole world must be real. So as long as we experience any world, it will always seem to us to be real. The world of other states will seem to be dreams, because we no longer identify with the body of those states.
So in effect, you could say the world seems as real as we think we are, or as
we are real.
The ego.
As much as we think this body is I, the world seems to be real.
It seems to be real, right?
And the body will continue seeming to be I until ego is dissolved, because the very nature of ego is to hold on to a body as I. Ego cannot rise, stand, or flourish without holding a body as I.
Right.
Interestingly, Einstein said that time and space are a concept of the mind, they don't exist. So, to some extent, science is getting the picture of what Ramana says.
Yes and no. They may become a little bit close to it, but science is based on the belief that the world exists independent of ourselves. But if this world is just a dream, why to do so much research on it? When Bhagavan was once asked about the theory of evolution, is the theory of evolution true? Bhagavan said, if in a dream, if you see a big building, maybe a temple or a palace or something, and you may start wondering how many workmen would have worked on this to build such a magnificent big building, and where would these stones have come from? Where would they have quarried these stones? And you can go on researching how this building was built, who financed it, and everything. But when you wake up, all your research is meaningless. You may have found out so much in your dream. You may have found out there was a rich person who financed this building of this building, and there were so many skillful craftsmen who worked on carving the stones, and there were architects, and there were how the materials were transported there. You may have found out so much information. All that information becomes worthless when you wake up, because you know it was all just a mental creation. Likewise, all scientific research and all scientific theories about evolution. Well, I think in Bhagavan's day, they have the theory of evolution. They didn't have the Big Bang theory, but even the same goes for the Big Bang theory. All the theories of science, it may be true as far as this world is true. That is, so long as this world seems to be true, science also seems to be true. But ultimately, it's all just a dream. There's a fundamental difference between science is based on the idea that that objects are real. Whatever you see, whatever you perceive by the five senses is real. So objects are real. According to Advaita and Bhagavan, objects are unreal, because objects exist only in the view of the subject. And even the subject is ego. Even the subject is not real, because if subject investigates itself, it will merge back into its source, and only pure awareness will remain. So what actually exists is only pure awareness. So science is looking in the wrong direction. It's looking away from it. That is, the scientists are not making research on themselves. They're making research on other things. Even nowadays, a new branch of science is consciousness. But they try to take consciousness as an object. They think consciousness must arise somehow in the brain, and neuroscientists do so much research on the brain. The brain is just an object that appears in consciousness. How can so long as we look at anything other than ourselves, we cannot know what we actually are. What actually exists is only I. As Bhagavan says, Yatathamai Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. What actually exists is only the real nature of oneself. The real nature of oneself is just Satchidananda. Where can we find Satchidananda? Not by looking outside, only by looking within, because we are that. So looking at, doing research on anything other than ourselves can only take us away from ourselves. It can't enable us to return to ourselves. That is why Bhagavan said, in the third verse of Āṉma-Viddai, he says, Tannai aridal indri, pinne edu arihil en. That is, what N here it literally means what, but it means what is the use or what's the benefit of knowing everything else without knowing oneself. Tanne arindidil, if one knows oneself, pin enne ulladu ariya. If one knows oneself, what else is there to know? So, according to Bhagavan, trying to know about anything other than ourselves is futile. It's of no use, because none of these things are real. It's like doing research in a dream. However much research we do in a dream, whatever we learn about the dream world, it's of no value. It seems to be of value so long as we're dreaming. When we wake up from a dream, whatever we have discovered in a dream is all of no value. So trying to know anything other than ourselves is just perpetuating the illusion of ego, the illusion that I am this person. So we need to give up our interest in trying to know anything other than ourselves and try and know only what we are. If we know what we are, then, as he says, if one knows oneself, then what else is there to know? There's nothing else to know, because all other things appear only in the view of ego. When we know ourselves, ego will thereby dissolve back into its source, and everything else will cease to exist along with it. So many people try and draw parallels between the findings of science and Advaita philosophy, but there may be superficial similarities in the more the superficial Advaita understood superficially and science understood superficially may seem to resonate with each other. But Advaita means not two, one without a second. Ekame eva advaitam. There's one only without a second. That one thing which is without a second is ourself, as Bhagavan says in the first sentence of this paragraph. What actually exists is only ourself. So trying to know anything other than ourselves is useless, because it's all just as he says, it's a kalpana, it's a mental fabrication, just like a dream. So we really, of course, so long as we take ourselves to be a body and seem to live in this world, the findings of science seem to be very useful. That is, because of science, we have more comfortable lives and more convenient lives. You've got so many things, like you're all in California, in San Diego, I'm in London, but we're talking as if we were in the same room. These are all products of science, but it's all a part of this dream. None of this is real. If you're going to dream, it's nicer to have a comfortable dream than an uncomfortable dream. But beyond that, science is based on a metaphysical assumption, the assumption that objects exist independent of the subject. That is a fallacy. So because it is based on an erroneous metaphysical assumption, you cannot draw any useful metaphysical conclusions from the findings of science. If you want to know what is real, what actually exists, not merely science that makes research on what seems to exist, but if we want to know what actually exists, we need to investigate ourselves, to whom everything else seems to exist.
So you would say the non-dualism of science is in the opposite direction of the non-dualism that we are talking about.
Yes.
And a
I mean,
quick question.
as I say, science has its own place within this dream world, but it cannot tell us the reality that underlies this dream.
Right.
Because so long science is making research on objects, on things other than ourselves. Even, as I say, even when they try to research on consciousness, they want to take consciousness as an object that they can research. They're trying to find how does consciousness arise in the brain, as if consciousness was a thing. And you will often hear modern day scientists and philosophers. They say consciousness is very, very complicated. What is simpler than consciousness? Everything that appears in consciousness is complicated, but consciousness is one and simple, indivisible. As Bhagavan says, it's anadi, beginningless, ananta, endless, limitless, akanda, undivided. It is just one infinite whole. So there's nothing simpler than consciousness. But because they try to find consciousness, they want to investigate consciousness as if it was an object, they get confused about it, and it all seems very complicated to them.
Well, it's not complicated. To me, it feels very mysterious or miraculous in some sense.
Yes, but what is that miracle happens every time we rise as ego. As soon as we rise as ego, this whole world comes into existence.
Right. From the egoic perspective, everything seems to be a mystery, like, you know, and magnificent, really. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Ted, were you going to ask a question? Well, I'm afraid it's a really stupid question, a really silly question. Michael, I'm wallowing in my ego right now, looking at the 10 of us here, learning about non-duality from a scholar, for which I'm very grateful. And you seem to be wallowing in ego too, answering our questions and explaining all of this to us.
Yes.
And you seem to know far, and I say this respectfully because I believe it to be true. Yeah. You're far more aware of the reality of only awareness, and everything else is moot. Why do you do this? I mean, it'll be helpful for me to understand why.
Very good question.
You dally in the ego of this.
Because I still have strong Vishaya vasanas. So my mind still goes outward. When my mind goes outwards, rather than allowing the mind to dwell on other things, dwelling on Bhagavan's teachings is useful because it reminds me to keep on turning back within.
Well, another school of thought is, and I appreciate that response, I like it, but another school of thought is that Ted, the mind-body Ted, created this dream of 10 people on something called Zoom today with a scholar explaining this to us. Am I writing you into my dream, or am I being written into your dream?
Ted did not create all this. Ted is a creature, part of the creation. It is the I that is aware of itself as I am Ted that has created all this.
Why is it doing that?
Investigate it and see. See what it is. If you see what it is, you will find it never existed and therefore never did any of this. What actually exists is only the pure I am.
It seems like the true pure I am would have better things to do than to play these games with us.
The pure I am has nothing to do. It never does anything. Its nature is not doing, but being. Doing is the nature of ego. As soon as that is the first of all doings. The doing that gives rise to all other doings is our rising as ego. So as soon as we rise as ego, then our attention goes outwards and we wander around under the sway of our vasanas. So doing is the nature of ego. Our real nature is just being, not doing anything.
Thank you.
So we can't blame I am. The pure I am is, because the pure I am is unaffected by all these things. If you watch a cinema, there may be a war, there may be a famine, there may be a fire. You can't blame the screen.
Yes.
The only one you can blame is who is the fool who's watching all these things. Investigate the watcher, the one who is seeing all this, the one that is seeing this world and seeing itself as tagged within that world. If you investigate that one will take flight, because that one is just an imposter. Are you familiar with the story Bhagavan used to tell of the bridegroom's friend?
No.
Okay. Bhagavan often used to tell this story to illustrate the nature of ego. That is, in India in the old days, marriages were elaborate affairs. They generally went on for 5 days. The wedding would usually be held in the bride's village. So the bridegroom and all his family and friends and relatives and everyone, they would come to the bride's village, and the bride's family lay on this big marriage ceremony for 5 days. Everyone would have to be fed and taken care of and everything. One day a wayfarer was passing through a village, and he saw that a wedding was about to start. The bridegroom's party was just coming there. So he thought, oh, this is a very good opportunity, a way to get free food for a few days. So he as the bridegroom's party was approaching the village, he joined them. And as soon as they reached the bride's house, he went and started giving instructions to the bride's family. Or you must provide accommodation for them, you must do this, you must do that. And he would go back to the bridegroom's party as if he was conveying messages from the bride's party. So both the bride's party assumed that he was what is called the Mapre Torum, the friend of the bridegroom, the best man. And the bridegroom's party assumed that he was an important member of the bride's family. So for 5 days, he had a great time, being very busy, giving instructions, making sure everyone was taken care of, and most of all, that he was well taken care of. Because everyone thought he was an important member of the other party, they all treated him very well and fed him sumptuously, and he was doing fine. At the end of the 5 days, when all the guests were leaving, only the bride and the bridegroom's family, the immediate close family, the parents and so on, remained. And then they started asking about who is this person, who is that person. Then one of them asked, who is that very helpful man who was the bridegroom's friend? They said, no, he didn't belong to our party. He was your party. They said, no, we don't know anything about him. Then they said, oh, if he doesn't belong to either of us, then let us find out who he is. He quickly smelt a rat, and he knew the game is up. So he quickly disappeared. Likewise, ego, it doesn't belong either to Satchit or to the body, but it's a spurious entity that rises between the two, taking on the nature of Satchit, which is being existence and awareness. So it takes its substance from Satchit, and it takes on the form of a body, and it says, I am this body. So like that wayfarer posed both as a friend of the bride's party and the bridegroom's party, this ego poses as if it belongs both to the body and to I am. But if we begin to investigate it, it will run away, because it's an imposter. It doesn't belong to either. It is neither the body nor is it Satchit. So the whole world is created by this imposter. So long as we are looking at the world, the imposter's enjoying his marriage feast, enjoying the marriage feast. But if we begin to investigate, who is this I to whom all these things appear? Who is this I who's enjoying this world? He will slip away because he doesn't belong. He's neither this nor that. He's just a formless phantom.
Well, my wayfarer seems to be pretty stubborn and refuses to.
The problem is we are not sincere in our investigation.
That must be it. He's not taking it seriously.
Because it's a wayfarer who has to investigate himself.
Okay. He's got to destroy himself.
And he's not willing to, so long as he's enjoying the marriage feast.
Yeah, indeed. I've got a healthy appetite, apparently.
Yes.
Well,
doesn't the ego also enjoy the self actualization?
What do you mean by self-actualization?
That is, the ego seems to have a good drive because, it throws up thoughts about, this happened today. I lost the concept of time, space. I did this and I did that. So
long as it throws up any concept,
right,
any thought of anything, it's holding on to something other than itself. So it doesn't matter what it is, holding on to that is attending to anything other than ourselves perpetuates ego. That is, we seem to be ego only when we're looking at other things. If we look at ourselves, has anyone ever seen ego? If we look for it, there's no such thing to be found. But it seems so real so long as we are looking at other things.
Yes. So, Michael, I have a request.
Yes.
And I think I wrote to you that when you feel like, could you share some of your experience in this path of Atma-vichara so that, we understand it from an experiential position?
Experiences, we can describe experiences of anything other than ourselves. That is, all things other than ourselves are Viseśha. That is, they've got distinguishing features that we can say something about. Can you tell me about your experience of I am? That is, we are all clearly aware that I am, but can you describe what is that awareness I am? We can't describe
There's nothing.
There's nothing. So any experience I may tell you about would only be a distraction, because our aim is in this path of self-investigation. We are not looking for any experience. We are trying to investigate who is the experiencer. So long as we are looking for experiences or interested in experiences, we're interested in things other than ourselves. So any experience is an Atma. It's something other than ourselves. Our aim is not, Bhagavan said, give up an Atma-vichara, take up Atma-vichara. That is, we should stop investigating anything other than ourselves and investigate only ourselves.
Michael, on this Day of Independence in America, I'd like to thank you for furthering my and hopefully everybody else's independence.
Right. Well, now you can become independent of this British fellow who had colonized you all.
Thank you.
Well, now you are our friends. So
okay. I think all my bad deeds of the past are forgiven.
But you don't exist, Michael.
Well, yes. True forgiveness is only in that state where we merge back into our source. Until then, we have to continue carrying the burden of our past deeds.
Indeed. And wasn't it claimed that Ramana said his highest teaching was silence?
Yes.
And so I think to Ronnie's point, if you are to teach the highest silence, and you'd come on here and say nothing.
Yes.
Right.
But teaching in words serve one purpose and one purpose alone, to direct our attention back within,
Yes.
where silence alone exists.
Absolutely.
You cannot find silence outside. When Bhagavan talked about silence, he wasn't talking about physical silence. He wasn't even talking about mental silence. He was talking about that silence from which both mind and body, mind and world appear.
Indeed. Well, I think that's a great place to end this satsang. Thank you so much, Michael.
Right. Okay,
Thank you, Michael.
Right.
Thank
Okay. Thank
Happy 4th of July, everybody.
you. Okay.
And to you.
Thank you.
Let us investigate ourselves and get the real independence, the real freedom, mukti.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Freedom from the
Yes.
person we seem to be. Freedom from ego. That is the real independence.
Here, here.